All right, guys, this week we got Chris Phillips with us, financial planner, financial advisor with us, coming to talking to us about the basics of finance. Chris, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, George. I'm happy to be here.
So, Chris, one thing that I do like to do for all my shows is really just kind of deep dive a little bit about our guests. So, what is your background? Tell us a little bit about yourself, how you got into this industry, and kind of where how you got to this point in your career today.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's see. I actually started off, I had an undergraduate degree in marketing, and I was one of those guys who said, I'm going to use my degree. I'm going to do what I went to school for. So I went to work for a mattress firm. I live in Houston, and their corporate office is here.
Okay.
And so I had a good friend who had gone to work there in the sales management and was able to transition to corporate in a year. They had a good program for that, kind of fast track you in. And so I went through the same sort of thing. Within a year, I was in the corporate marketing department. Thought, oh, I made it. I'm doing what I went to school for. And so I was there for about maybe a little over a year after that, and just really was not loving the corporate rat race. And I was young and had been successful. And when you're in sales management, you hit the benchmark, you move up. And the corporate is a little slower. And so it just wasn't working out, and I kind of lost interest, wasn't inspired. They could see that as well. And so after about 2.5 years with the firm, I left and really didn't know what I wanted to do. I would love to work for the advertising agency or something like that. But there's not a lot of those in Houston, right? So retail marketing just wasn't what I thought it was. And so I kind of fell back on my financial background because I went straight through from undergrad to grad school and got my MBA. And during that time, I was actually working in insurance sales. I worked and sold supplemental insurance. And so I ended up going to work for one of the big banks after a brief period of kind of about a year and a half, 2 years of just running my own consulting firm for small businesses. It's like, hey, if I can do a marketing plan for a big business, I can do it for small businesses. But eventually, you want insurance, you want the 401k, you want the benefits. So I went and got a day job, right? We worked for a big bank on the lending side. So I had insurance experience. I had lending experience. And then was able to move up with that big bank and getting to a financial advisor role. So now I work with one of the 4 major wirehouses in the nation as a financial advisor. And I've been overall in the financial industry now for over a dozen years. I've specifically been a financial advisor for going on 7 years now, I think. And kind of what inspired me really to do it was I realized that what I loved wasn't necessarily marketing per se. What I loved was seeing a problem that whether it was an individual or a business had, and coming up with a strategy on how to take them from where they are and providing a solution to solve that problem or get them from point A to point B, kind of in their growth, or maybe it's point C or D, depending on how long we work together, right? And then I realized I can help people in a meaningful and significant way through the financial industry and still kind of get that problem-solving fix that I always felt like I was good at, that I always felt like was natural for me, and find a way to get paid to do it. And so that's kind of the big thing. I always think it's important to have a career where you feel good about the company you work for, good about the pay you get, but also good about the purpose, right, of what you do. And so that's really kind of what inspired me in this direction, as well as, just seeing some things in my own family. I didn't come from much, and seeing some pivotal decisions made, by my mother at different points in her life, where, kind of that road in the forest diverged, right? And it's like, if you had gone this way and made that decision, things would have been better. But not having that education, not thinking, because no one thinks they're wealthy or they're rich, so they don't necessarily go talk to somebody, and then you end up making an uninformed decision that could have made a world of difference if you'd done it a different way in terms of your financial success and that sort of thing. So some of those personal experiences like that in my family, as well as kind of realizing the things that really matter to me about my work and trying to help people, was really what led me into this field. And I've been loving it ever since I've been here, man, to be honest.
No, that's great because a lot of people that we talk to, you kind of at some point along the journey and the road, like something clicks. Like, hey, you know, I've found this industry that I love, and I'm helping people, which just makes that much 10 times better because now I feel good about going to work every day. I love to solve problems, and I'm helping people do it. So that
Right.
I definitely love the story. Now, this show, or at least for this episode of the show, we really want to highlight, we're here in 2021, where it's a brand new year. 2020 was 2020, and we can
Yeah.
we can we can leave it at that. But a lot of people came out of 2020 with new realizations, probably did a lot of self-reflection and kind of looked at their lives a lot differently, as probably going into 2020. um and I'm sure finances kind of, that kind of hit a lot of people as well, just trying to get financially right. Now, from your standpoint, what are some of the most common pitfalls that we see people run into when it comes to, trying to achieve financial success?
I think, if we're kind of starting off at the beginning level, the biggest pitfall is the failure to budget, honestly. Um, when someone asks you, what is your monthly cost of living? You should have a general idea. Now, there's engineer types out there and people who love spreadsheets and they put it all in a spreadsheet every month. They could tell you almost to the single dollar. But if you don't have an idea of what your monthly cost of living is and your monthly bring home pay is, then you can't even really begin to budget, right? And so just knowing those two numbers will give you an idea of how much extra money you're spending or overspending,
Right.
and then starting to try to find a way to um, adjust your habits so that you are paying yourself first, in terms of putting money in savings, and then eventually putting money into investments. And so I think that's the single biggest pitfall we see, with folks who are starting out trying to build their wealth.
Now, did you see that coming out of 2020, that became a real realization of a lot of people, that they probably couldn't even tell you what their financial situation was?
Well, I think what we saw more of in 2020 was people realizing how much they had been spending up until they were stuck at home, right?
Right.
When people had to go to the grocery store and come home and cook, suddenly they realized how much they had been eating out, right? Or how much, when you can't go to the bar anymore, you realize, man, I've been going to the bar on Fridays and having $100 tab, that's a regular thing for me.
Right.
And then, I go out to eat for lunch every day, or with the family a couple times a week, and you start looking, you're like surprised to see how much extra money was in your bank account because you were stuck at home.
Right.
That bottle that you can buy at the liquor store for $40, if you're at the club on a Saturday night, you're paying 300 for that thing. So
Right.
that's the biggest change I think we saw in 2020, was people realizing, oh wow, like I've been spending so much more money than I realized, because now they couldn't spend it the same way.
Right. Now, for someone getting started on just the basics, you brought up budgeting, and I know a lot of people will probably think that as a dirty word, right? When you start talking finances, because finances is always a touchy subject with people. But you know, how can someone really get started? To really build a budget, and we don't have to go into super fine detail, but like, what's the basics to get started on really figuring out what your monthly budget is?
Right. So I think the basics are, first just to write down all your bills, right? So whether that's rent or a mortgage, a car note, auto insurance, home insurance. Some people, home insurance is paid annually. Divide it into 12, right? Any of those annual bills, divide it into 12, add it to your monthly set of bills. That's the first place to start. Then what you want to look at are things like groceries and gas, things that you need on top of those bills. You write those down. And so essentially, when you have all the utilities and regular bills and that sort of thing, plus your home or apartment, wherever you stay, any insurance, and then your gas and groceries, that for the most part, maybe daycare and those sort of things, that's kind of like the bare minimum, what we need to make it through each month. right? And then from there, I like to encourage people to say, okay, now write down the extra spending budget, right? And so we're not actually making a budget yet. We're just tracking what we normally spend. And you can kind of look back. A lot of banking websites and apps have spending tracking that they can offer for you. And you can just kind of use that sometimes to say, I've been spending this much at the restaurants, I've been spending this much at the movies, this much shopping, etc. But figure out the extras that you spend.
Right.
And that kind of gives you the idea of how much you spend every month, right? And so certainly I'm not telling anyone they can't enjoy the fruits of their labor. I believe that budgeting is like dieting, right? If you don't have scheduled cheat days, it's really hard to stick with that diet long term and make it a lifestyle. Same thing with budgeting. Like, you got to take yourself out every now and then, go on a vacation, whatever. But if you're budgeting, then those things don't break the budget, right? You don't spend all your savings on those things. But it helps you, it rewards you to stick with it. And so once you know the spending that you're doing every month, you can then start to say, I can cut back here a little bit, I can cut back there a little bit, and start figuring out how much can you actually put in a savings account. And so that's kind of the first step. And I'll kind of hold there. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole.
Yeah, no, and guys, as you guys are listening, for this week's episode, yeah, we're talking the basics on financing and trying to grow your financial future and things of that sort. At no point, again, this is all just kind of the basics and habits in which you can form. And a lot of it, for a lot of things I do on the show, it's, hey, I want you to kind of almost self-realize. I want you to have this self-talk with yourself, because if you do this, you may, again, you don't have to take any of Chris's advice, but you may have a wow moment to say, hey, I have this one thing on auto pay, or my Starbucks auto renews every week, when I hit $100, but holy crap, I'm spending $300 a month at, this place that I'm not even realizing that money is going out the window. And it's to help really just, again, guys, to help you take a look at it, have maybe an aha moment, and then adjust whatever your habits may be. And then Chris is really just here to add to that on just different avenues that you can take with, trying to become more financially stable and make 2021 a better year financially for yourself. So again, budgeting, I love budgeting. I'm kind of the half spreadsheet, half lazy kind of guy. You hit it. I have an app that's linked to my bank account that gives me a monthly report on what I spent, right? Just based on the actions, like, hey, you spent this much, on your home. This is all your utility bills. And then here's this big chunk of entertainment stuff, right? So there's multiple ways out there, but it at least gives me an idea. And this is what we're trying to instill for everybody else, is to get that idea on what that is. Because again, if you see that way more is going out than what's coming in, then that can help at least set the foundation to move you in the right direction.
Right. Because think about it again like this. Just like I bring up the dieting thing, because it really is, that's what it comes down to me, is dieting with your money. If you use an app, like I have an app on my phone, because I'm on a kind of a health goal kind of myself,
right,
journey myself, trying to get back in the shape I used to be in my 20s, right? So if you just have an app or somewhere you're writing down what you put in your mouth every day, and it tells you, like, here's the calories in that meal, here's the calories in that can of soda and the sugar you had or whatever, without purposely planning anything, you start to kind of change your habits, like once you're aware of what you're doing. So the same thing happens with your money. When you're writing down, that's why I tell people, budgeting to me at first starts with just kind of recording, like tracking what you're doing. When you start writing it down, almost subconsciously, you'll start choosing to do some different things, because once you're aware of it, we can't help but to try to change it in a way that we're happier with, right? And most people just are not aware of what they're actually doing and spending the money on.
Right. No, it's so much is about education. And even with this show, it's just, hey, here's another way to look at it, right? I'm not telling you this is how Chris looks at it. He has the background on it. This is how I look at it. Again, we're not all the same. It may not all work for everyone the same way, but hey, if you could take something the way way Chris does it, or piece of advice that I give you to add to your repertoire of, your bag of tricks on how you handle your finances, then you're that much closer to bettering yourself, right? You're just adding a new trick, and you're helping identify, self-identification about anything really, whether it's your finances, whether it's your health habits, it's whether, we've talked about, self-sabotage and talking bad about ourselves, and when it comes to achieving our goals, just self-identification of a lot of things will help set the foundation on so much out there, and moving moving past budgeting, Chris. So now once we start to establish, hey, where's our money coming in and out of, kind of what's the next step for someone to really start to consider, if they're trying to build wealth for the future for them and their family?
So I think the next step then is identifying a savings goal, right? So once we know what we're spending and we have an idea of what we bring home every month, regardless of how that looks, whether it's imbalanced or not, is targeting a savings goal. Because some folks oversave, right? And I'll explain what I mean by that. So basically, there are a few different places that we can position our money in life, right? I usually call them buckets. So there's an immediate bucket, right, that we can put our money in, and this is money that we're going to need immediately. Like in the next 30 days, we're going to use this money on whatever it is, right? And most of the times, that's kind of the monthly cost of living stuff, and that's really more like your checking account, right? Then we have a short-term bucket, and that's for the things that we're probably going to, not probably, those are things we're going to need over the next year or two, right? And so if we're for sure going to spend this on something in the next 2 years, that's probably in the short-term bucket, and that's the savings account, right? Then there's two other buckets. There's an intermediate term bucket. It's things we're going to spend in the next 3 to 4 years. These aren't maybes. These are for sure. We're buying a house in 3 years, and this is what I need for my down payment, right? We put that there, and that's usually for CDs. Now, these days, CDs aren't really paying anything different from a savings account. So right now, a lot of my clients and people I work with are using their savings kind of to cover that CD bridge. No sense in locking it up if you can't get any extra money out of it, right? And then there's a long-term bucket. Now, this is money that we don't have any plans for at least the next 4 years, right? Now, certainly if something comes up, we'll get into that money, but there's actually nothing that we haven't planned for, okay? And then, so that long-term bucket is usually where we start looking at investments, okay? Investments of any sort, whether it's traditional investments in the stock and bond markets that the financial advisor like myself would help you with, or investments in your own business or whatever it is, right? Some people in real estate, but usually that's your long-term money that you don't have plans with, okay? So coming back, the magic question is always, how much should we have in our savings account, right? So the generic textbook answer says that if you don't have any children, you need 3 to 6 months of your cost of living in your emergency savings, right? And if you have children who are dependent on you, then you need 6 to 12 months, all right? So I kind of just split that right in the middle and say 6 months. It's a nice, easy target for everybody. Some people are fine with a little less. Some people want more. But 6 months of your cost of living is essentially what you want in an emergency savings account that you don't really even look at. And that's for like if you and your spouse lost your job suddenly and couldn't go to work, which in 2020 a lot of people experienced, right? You can continue to pay your bills and continue to live your lifestyle, keep a roof over your home, keep your car for up to 6 months while you try to find another job or some other source of income. And if you cut back on a few things, maybe you can drag it out to 7, 8, or 9 months, something like that, right? That's what that emergency savings is for in general. Now, sometimes you need it because the AC went out in July in Texas, and Lord knows that's an emergency, right? but then you replenish it. If you use it, you replenish it. So what we want in our savings is anything we know for certain we're going to spend in the next 2 years, plus the 6 months of our cost of living, right? Beyond that, it honestly does not make a lot of sense to keep piling money into savings, especially considering today's interest rates, right? And so that's where we see a lot of people make the mistake is they don't know how much to put in savings, so they never get enough, or they don't know how much to put in there, and then they oversave, right?
Right.
They clear that mark and just keep piling money in. So that's kind of the next step. Once you budget, is setting a target for saving, and then once you've reached that target, the next step is deciding what to do with your excess money. And there's a lot of routes you can go there. Some people want to pay off the mortgage faster. Some people want to invest in real estate, like we said, other things. That's kind of the next big decision is, what do I do after I've accomplished the savings goal?
Right. Now, how do you advise clients to start that process on how much to pull out to drop into savings? Because we're talking, yeah, we know what that number is for that cost of living, but I
Right.
can't just take that out of my paycheck first go round. So how do you split, or what are some average percentages that you normally would advise maybe a client or a first timer to say, hey, take 3% and put it here, or what's kind of that starting baseline?
Right. So the generic number I usually tell people when they're starting off is 10%. Take 10%, right? So whatever your faith is, right? A lot of people give 10% to church, right? Which some people give less, some people give more. That's kind of the generic number that a lot of people are told, 10%. What I say is take another 10% and put it in your savings, right? That just gets you started, right? If you can take 10% of your income, you bring home, right, and put it in savings on day one, check comes in on Friday, by Saturday, you put 10% in savings, right? And then you're just living off what's left in the checking account. That starts to build a habit, right? And once that gets easy and comfortable, we start to see our savings going up, and it becomes almost like a reinforcing habit, because everyone likes to see their savings account grow. You start logging in and checking it, like, oh, that looks good. Right. And then you want to do more. So if it's really hard for you, I say start with 10%, right? If you can't do 10, start with 5, but start somewhere, right? You got to start somewhere. Once that 10% is easy, right, and it's just part of your life and your routine, or if it's easy for you now and you just haven't been doing it, then I encourage to push you for an additional 10%. And what I say is the first 10% you take out is for yourself now, right? If emergencies come up or anything like that, you've got it there. Once that emergency savings is built up, you can have that 10% going into more of a fun sort of thing. And honestly, that emergency savings may take a while to build. So every now and then, once a year, peel a little out and go do something fun, a vacation or something, right? Or whatever it is for you. Some people this year, it's a PS5, right? But so let's say you get the 10% that's coming out right now. After the emergency savings is filled, this is really just your money to enjoy now, right? Well, the only person that's as important as you are is the future version of yourself, right? And a lot of people will say, their kids and their parents, and these things are all important. But if you don't take care of yourself financially, you'll become a burden to one of those people, right? Either become a burden on your parents or you become a burden on your children, right? And that's the cold, hard truth. And so the most important person financially first is yourself, so that you don't become that burden. And then, so that's why I say that second 10% is important, because that's money you're putting back for a future you, right? And that money is what we want to be investing, okay? So if you got 10% going in savings and 10% going to investing, because it's two different things, then I think you're really in a good position to start the beginnings and kind of have that foundation of building real wealth in your life.
No, that's great, Chris, because it's one of those things to where, again, a lot of people, there's so many things out there that you can look at, but, just getting started, I think you hit it on the head. If you find out what that number is, take a look at your take home. Like, again, it causes some work. I know we all get direct deposit and everything else, and that can help you in some ways. I would say that you can work with your employer. There's, you don't have to put your 100% of your check into your checking account. They have the option to break some of that off. And if it's easier for you, if you know yourself, right? Because I know myself, and I'm like, hey, if you give me the money, I'm not going to take it to the bank. I'd rather you take it from to begin with, so I don't see it and I can be with it, and knowing what that number is after you take it from me, then set it up that way. But really have that, look at your check, look what 10% is, and is it really true to yourself? If that doesn't work, okay, 5%. But Are you going to manually move 5%? Do you know yourself well enough to move it manually yourself? And for some people, yeah, because they like that satisfaction, they get that receipt, they look, it's getting bigger, it's growing, I'm doing this. And there's other people like myself that's easier, that you don't see it, and I know it's in my check-in, and when I check my savings account, it is getting bigger, but it's automatically getting there.
Right.
You see too, with it's probably like a 50-50, maybe.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, everyone has their own. There's some people who still do the envelope system where they put money for the bills and money for the groceries. So I think, like you said, the key is knowing yourself and knowing your own temptations and habits, right? So absolutely, most companies will split a direct deposit up, and so you can tell them send 10% or 20% or 5% to this account, and then send the rest of my direct deposit to this account, which maybe is your main checking account. So that's a fantastic point, George, that you bring up there. And I think the biggest thing you said is knowing yourself, right? Some people, that savings account can't even be at the same bank where the rest of the money is, because when you log in, you'll see it and you'll be like, oh, right. Like for myself, I'm a big foodie. So I had like my Starbucks, you mentioned Starbucks, I had a Starbucks app. I have, different restaurant apps, Whataburger is my thing. And so I get these push notifications like, oh, we got to sell. Well, here I go running out. Eventually, I got to turn these notifications off, right? So it's the same sort of thing. Sometimes it's just easier not to see. You got to know yourself, whatever your weakness is, and adjust for it and help yourself overcome it, right? It's not just, well, that's how I am. It's let me work on it, right? And that's kind of the big thing.
Yeah, no, because I'm definitely that guy. Like, my savings is a completely different bank than my checkings, right? Because I know when I open my wallet, the debit card that's linked to my checking account is stuffed away behind other ones, and the one I use on a daily basis is that first one. And there's no temptation to, I can just transfer it, like, oh, man, I have to log into a different app, and it takes more effort, but it stops me from tapping into that. And again, that's just me knowing myself. My wife's completely different. She has a lot more restrained and
right.
And it's truly about knowing yourself. Now, Chris, now that we've kind of got budgeting in that kind of sorted, let's talk about, people who don't know how to plan, that are just frustrated, but know they need the help. What is the true role of a financial advisor?
So I tell people that my job is to work with folks, understand what's important in their life and what the priorities are, and then understand what their long-term goals are. And then I help develop a plan that helps them get from where they are to accomplishing the most important goals they have in life. Okay, so that's in a nutshell what I do. Okay, I help people after I understand what's important to them, what their goals are. I help them get a plan and stick to that plan to take them from where they are to accomplishing those most important goals. Now, that's kind of broad. So what that looks like when we get down into the nitty gritty is really managing the emotions of money, right? And that's a tough thing to do, because all our lives, since we were children, we've been taught the value of money, right? And how important it is, and how you can't get what you want in life without money. Like when the ice cream truck comes, you got to sprint to the house, get your parents to give you a couple of dollars, sprint back out to the corner, and hopefully you get there before the ice cream truck leaves so you can get your ice cream, because they're not giving it away for free, right? And so from the time we're a little kid, we are focused with this idea of acquiring money primarily so we can spend it on the things we want, right? And what becomes difficult for people is the idea of not spending the money on everything I want today, the whole idea of delayed gratification, right? I'm gonna put off something for later when I can enjoy it more fully because it doesn't set me back, right? But then also just the idea of taking a risk and actually investing their long-term money, because we've worked so hard to get the money, we don't want to take a chance to lose it, right? So now we're like holding on to it and clutching it, right? But ultimately we know that if we want to grow wealth and not just have some money, that requires investing, right? And so helping people manage those emotions, manage the risk, inside of their investing habits and styles, and kind of sometimes holding their hand and talking them off the cliff when things look bad, and saying, hey, look, don't pull all of your money out of your investments. Let them do their thing. This is long-term money. Right. Or sometimes kind of giving the extra push when they don't want to invest because they're too worried about timing the market, or seeing a certain number in their savings account saying, look, you're going to have to, if you want to accomplish those goals, here's what you're going to have to do. I'm not saying it just for fun. I'm saying it because you told me that item A is very important to you. We can't check that off our list, handling your money the way we have been, right? And so that's kind of the biggest thing, I think, is helping people to manage their emotions around their money.
Now, what would you say, if you could clarify, what would be the myth in the industry on what a financial advisor is and does?
I think the biggest myth in the industry is that a financial advisor, and this comes from movies like Wolf on Wall Street, right? Like how things were in the 80s and 90s, probably more than anything, and even before that. For the history of the stock market up until basically the early 2000s, financial advisors essentially were stockbrokers, right? They called you and said, here's the next hot thing you should buy. And you did or did not buy it. And then they called you back and said, now it's time to sell that and go buy something else. And that's kind of what they did. And so now there's still some financial advisors who do more transactional business like that. But there have been laws passed to make sure that those folks are not recommending you buy and sell things unnecessarily, right? To kind of protect the consumer. We call those churning when they're recommending unnecessary transactions. But most of the time now, financial advisors are more focused on helping you plan, right? And helping you to have a diverse portfolio and spread the risk across a lot of different industries and companies and even nations when you invest. And so the biggest thing I get is people come up to me and say, hey, Chris, what do you think about insert company name?
Right.
And want me to give them some hot insight on that company. Or what do you think about Bitcoin or whatever it is, right? Should I buy it now? Should I sell it now? And I think that's the biggest misperception. I spend very little of my day looking at stocks and ETFs and mutual funds directly and seeing how they're performing and doing essentially what is short-term trading, right? The majority of my day is spent working with my clients, putting together financial plans for them, and doing research and analysis on more of economic trends, industry trends, that sort of thing, so we can understand the long arc of what's happening, because we're not short-term investors, right? Trading is short-term. Investing is long-term. And so I think that's the biggest misperception that people have of financial advisors, is that they can just talk to them and get a bunch of hot stock tips all the time.
Right. And for everyone out there listening and watching, again, a financial advisor, similar to a real estate agent, has a fiduciary responsibility to put their client's interests first over their own. Their main role is to protect their client, through the transaction, whether on a real estate transaction or through their own financial transaction. Again, their main goal is to serve their clients first. And again, as you go out to maybe look for somebody, again, that's you need to know that, again, that
absolutely.
Get away from the idea of like, hey, these guys are salespeople and just looking to make a check, and they're just going to try to feed product down my throat. No, they're taking your needs, building the plan, and offering the services available that best fit for you. Again, it's truly up to you to take the step forward to move forward in the process. And again, like Chris said, he spends most of his time trying to plan based on your needs and at least show you the options that you may not be fully familiar with, and even some alternative options, because everyone, again, the first thing they think of is just the stock market when it comes to investing, and things of that sort. So now, Chris, what would you say for those folks that are looking for a financial advisor? What are they really looking for? Again, I know you work for a particular company, and every company is a little bit different. What are some, I guess, simple tips at least to find the right fit for a financial advisor?
Yeah, that's a great question, George. I think That answer is a little different for each person because we all have things that are important to us. I think first and foremost, you want to find someone that you feel comfortable with. All right, because when you work with a good financial advisor, it's going to be a relationship that is based on honest communication, right? And so they're going to ask you a lot of personal questions about what your debts look like, what your income looks like, how much disposable cash flow do you have? They're going to ask you questions about, do you want to leave money to each of your kids equally, right? Because that's tough for some people, right? Some of the kids aren't as responsible as others, and that sort of thing. So sometimes leaving money in a fair way is more important than leave it in an equal way. And so these are sometimes money's personal, right? Because it affects our personal life. And so you're going to get into conversations with a good financial advisor, in my opinion, that are personal conversations. And if you put out bad information or information that's only partly true and not the full picture, then we can't get the most accurate plan together, right? If you put garbage in, you get garbage out.
Right.
And so that's one of the first things is someone you feel comfortable talking with and honest and being honest with and open with. Someone who takes a vested interest in you and not just your money, right? There are people who would just take the money, invest it, go get some return for you. I think the return you're trying to get in most cases is based on the goals you have. We're not just going for arbitrary numbers. Why? If I'm up in the World Series and we're in a tie ball game with a runner on third in the bottom of the ninth, I don't need necessarily to hit a home run. If I can get a bloop route into the midfield, we win the game, right? And so my swing is different based on that. So same thing in investing. We don't have to swing for the fences all the time if just singles will do the job, right? And so someone who has an interest in you and not just the money is important. And then you want to find someone who kind of fits your what's the word I want to use here? Your needs, I guess, in terms of how much you need to be hearing from them, right? Some people want to invest and they don't really want to hear about it. Call me once a year and talk to me, call me something's wrong, sort of thing. But some people want to hear every quarter how things are going. And
Right.
so there are all kinds of things now, from robo advising all the way out to a full service face-to-face financial advisor like myself. And so you just got to figure out what fits your current needs and then who you're comfortable working with more than anything, because most of the firms offer competitive products and programs. And
Right.
it really then comes down to personalities. Do we get along? Is it easy for us to work together? That sort of thing.
Now, would you recommend at least, people shopping around through different companies and like almost interviewing different financial advisors? Or
Absolutely. So not everybody does. I like to always myself, I try to go get 3 quotes on anything, right? And so whether it's something around my house or if I'm going to look for cars or whatever, financial advisors, CPA, attorneys, I'm going to try to talk to at least 3 people to get an idea of what they're saying differently and similarly and that sort of thing. One thing I caution people against is getting caught up on just the fees, right? Now, the fees are an important part of your decision making. Okay, the fee that the advisor charges or the fee that the robo advisor charges or whatever, those are an important part of the decision making, but they're not the only part, right? Is essentially, people like to get caught up on the word fees, but to me, it's the cost, right? There's all kinds of costs. There's costs that you get charged by the advisor or the advisor company, right? And there's costs that you get charged at the fund companies, and there's all kinds of other things in there. But ultimately, the fees are what most people get caught up on because it's more transparent usually,
Right.
and it's easier to compare, right? But what you want to look at is value, right? Cost is one thing, but the value is the other piece of that equation, right? Because for example, I drive a Toyota, right? And I don't drive a Toyota Corolla. I drive a Toyota Highlander because there was value in the extra cost to me, right? Toyota Corolla is entry model. It would get me from point A to point B, just like any other car would. But I like the leather seats. I like the sunroof. I like, the rear view camera and whatever, the upgrades, the extra size of the vehicle so family can get in easily. So I paid extra for that. My costs were more, but the value was there, right? Now, the value was not there to me in going to get a Lexus, which Toyota makes Lexus, right? I could have gotten a Lexus and spent more money on it, but I didn't see the value in the L on the front of my car if the rest of the stuff was basically the same. That's just me. Some people see the value in that, right? And so when you're kind of shopping, if you are a shopper, some people are not. They meet somebody, they feel comfortable, it clicks, they do business, right? But if you're a shopper and you want to interview multiple financial advisors, certainly keep an idea of what the fees are, but pay attention to the value as well, right? If someone's only going to call you once a year versus someone calling you 4 times a year, if someone's going to just invest the money for you versus somebody else who actually puts together a written financial plan or a written retirement plan for you that you can see and reference on a regular basis, those things change the value of what you're paying for, right? And so that's kind of the stuff that I encourage anyone who is shopping and interviewing, whether it's a financial advisor or anyone really, is to not just think of the cost alone, but think of any value that comes with it.
No, and Chris, so as we head out, what would be 3 tips for someone just starting out in 2021 who really wants to get control of their financial future and move forward?
So 3 tips just starting out. Number 1, know how much you spend every month and how much you get paid every month, right? Number 2, commit to saving 10% minimum, if you can, of what you're getting paid each month. And number 3, I would say, is put yourself, and we haven't really talked about this, but put yourself on a monthly allowance, right? So decide, okay, if I'm getting this much, I'm going to save 10%. Okay, fine. Take 10% and put it in your fund checking account or whatever it is, and that's what you can spend for the month. And that starts building some discipline for you, not only on saving, but on spending, because there's only, just like in politics, we talk about budgets and all this. There's only 2 ways when our budget's out of whack to fix it. One is to get more money, which for us as individuals is like getting another job or getting a promotion. In politics, it's like raising taxes, right? and the other is to cut spending, right? And so if that third one, if you can put yourself on an allowance, if you know you got a spending problem, say, okay, I'll give myself $300 a month to do whatever I want with. No questions asked. My wife and I do this, right? Here's our family money. Here's your allowance. Here's my allowance. We don't ask questions about the allowance money. You swipe the family card, you got to answer some questions, right? And so when you spend that $300, you got to wait till next month, right? So if you spend it all in a week, well, you get the next 3 weeks is going to be pretty sad, but whatever it is. So those are my 3 tips. Know what you're making, bringing home every month and what you're spending. Start saving 10% as your a bill. Pay yourself first, and then put yourself on an allowance each month. I think if you can implement those 3 things in 2021, you'll be amazed at the results that you see as we begin 2022.
No, I love it. And now, if we look at someone that kind of has that a little bit more experience, they do have a budget, they do put savings away. How can someone, or a couple tips how can someone, I guess you would say, a little bit more experience for 2021 to grow their overall financial future?
Right. So then I think if we were going that route, then we want to talk about making sure that you transition from being a saver to being an investor, right? And so we've got to know what our target number in savings is, because until we get that, we can't make that transition to investor. But once you're there, you got to make that transition if you're serious about building long-term wealth, okay? And from once you start investing, I think, we've talked about figuring out the right person or company to work with for you. But once you get to that point where you are an investor, then it's a matter of staying disciplined and investing no matter what, right? If the markets are down, we send X amount of money over. If the markets are up, we send X amount of money over. It's just part of our lifestyle. Every month, some of our money goes to investments. And that's what will begin growing your money, because in the beginning, more important than how much your investments are making you is how much you're putting into your investments, right? And that's really the truth, probably until you cross over six figures investing. And for some people, depending on how much you're actually putting in there, it's the truth until you get to about $250,000, right? And so you just got to have the discipline to do it. And in the business, we call it dollar cost averaging, because when the markets are down and you put, let's say, $1,000 a month in, you buy, if Apple was $100 a share, and I'm picking a company everyone knows. If Apple's was $100 a share and I put $1,000 in, I get 10 shares. But if the price dropped next month to $50 a share and I put another 1,000, well, now I'm getting 20 shares, right? If the price went up to 200, I put in 1,000, I get 5 shares. So when it was more expensive, I bought less of it. When it was less expensive, I bought more of it. Overall, the average cost of my shares of Apple have come down, right? And that's just a strategy that we use. Systematic investing helps bring down the average investments. Instead of trying to time the markets, it's the amount of time you spend in the markets is more important. Time in, not timing.
Gotcha. Awesome, Chris. Now, what if people want to find you who are listening? Do you have website or find you on social media?
Absolutely. So if you want to find me, look me up on Facebook. For now, I'm not going to give out my website's got my company name on it and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to push like I'm encouraging. There's not an advertisement for you to do business with me. But if you wanted to talk with me more, you could find me on social media. Chris Phillips on Facebook, at Talk with Topher on Instagram and Twitter. It's TalkwithTopher. So the last part of Christopher, right? Talk with Topher. And so, that's the best way to get a hold of me. And then I'm happy to have any conversation. Like I said, I got in this business to help people. And so whether or not you're at a phase in your life where you are ready to invest, or maybe you already are, if you have questions, you want to talk, I'm happy to have that conversation with you. And if it makes sense for us to take it somewhere into a more professional venue, then we can absolutely do that.
Yeah, most definitely, everybody. And like everyone that comes on the show, they are at least willing to have the conversation. And you've heard a guest before say, be curious and ask the questions. Again,
Right.
this is a resource for you guys. Again, I can't stress enough that in our daily lives, we have to be able to build a team within our lives, and a financial advisor is part of that team. But when you are ready, at least having the resources and networking, everyone that listens to our podcast, this is really what a network is in building your network. We've brought on so many different people across, different genres of work. And Chris is just another one of those. Again, I brought him on the show to talk about the basics. And if you have questions, reach out to him. And then if the fit is there, awesome and great. Is not if you pulled one or two pieces of information that you didn't know before from him and had additional questions, then great on you there as well. So Chris, thank you for all the knowledge, all the wealth. And I hope that one, you have a great rest of your week, and two, that 2021 is great on you and your family.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate you having me on. I wish you and your family all the best as well.
Yeah.
And I look forward to being able to help out in any way I can in the future, man. So good luck to you and with everything you're doing, man. It's great work you're doing here.
Yeah, no, most definitely, man. We will have to bring you back on at the tail end of the year. Got you here in the beginning. Let's talk about prepping for 2022 here at the tail end of the year, and talk and see how people did in 2021.
Sounds good, brother.
Awesome, man. You have a great day.
You too.